Hey guys, tonight we're wandering into the sun-baked silence of West Africa, tracing the powdery footprints of camel caravans and the heavy, glittering scent of history itself. Picture this. The sky is wide and white with heat, the wind tastes like dust, and on the back of every beast trudging across the Sahara sits not gold, but slabs of rock dull, grainy, crystalline salt. You're wrapped in a light linen robe, head covered against the sun. You squint toward the horizon, but all you see is sand, more sand, and the faint, mirage-like shimmer of distant movement. That's a caravan. That's where the action is, or, well, the extremely slow, patient version of action. Salt was everything here. Before gold had its moment in the spotlight, before the kings of Mali made headlines with their golden pilgrimages, there was Ghana, the ancient Ghana, not the modern country, where salt didn't just season food, it salted power, it salted the soul, and spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't have survived here without it. Really, no salt, no sweating, no walking, no surviving the 50 Celsius heat in your very fashionable but not particularly breathable sandals. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you're tuning in from tonight. Drop your location and your local time in the comments so we can build this sleepy little global caravan together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin, not at a palace, but at a pit. The salt mine doesn't look like much from a distance, just a series of open pits, scraped into the earth, ringed with wooden sledges and heaps of broken stone. But up close, it sparkles. Salt crystals glitter in the sun like crushed glass, and you can taste it in the air, sharp, drying, clinging to your tongue like static. It's here that the story begins, not with wealth, but with survival. Long before gold coins clinked in leather purses, salt was the first thing anyone traded seriously. Salt preserved food in this heat, salt cleaned wounds. Salt kept your nerves firing when the sun tried to fry your brain like a lentil pancake. In a region with no oceans nearby, no easy access to seasoning or preservation, salt was literally life, and so traders came. Caravans rolled in from North Africa, crossing the desert in long, creaking lines. Some walked nearly 1,000 miles from Mediterranean ports, hauling slabs of salt to exchange for gold, ivory, cola nuts, and yes, people. Because ancient trade wasn't exactly wholesome. It was business. It was brutal. It was necessary. Historians still argue whether the earliest salt traders were Berber nomads, Phoenician-adjacent traders, or something even older and dustier. But whoever they were, they left behind patterns, ancient grooves carved into the economy of an entire region. And in the middle of this swirling, trading mess sat Ghana. The Ghana Empire rose in the 6th or 7th century CE, not near the coast, but inland. At the crossroads of two gigantic trade zones, to the north, salt, to the south, gold. In the middle, a savvy empire with customs checkpoints, trade taxes, and a shocking number of very polite soldiers. Ghana didn't produce much salt itself, but it controlled access to the salt, and so salt became a source of political power. Want to get your slabs through? Pay the fee. Want to set up shop in a market? That'll cost you. Want to avoid bandits on the road? Funny you're in luck. The Ghana military just so happens to offer protection for a modest tax. You walk through the echoing market streets of County Sala, the empire's dual capital. It's bustling. Dust flies. Livestock bleats. Merchants yell. The air is thick with spice smoke and the tang of dried fish. And in the heart of the chaos, salt blocks, stacked like bricks, treated like gems, measured and eyed with suspicious admiration. Salt even served as currency in many parts of the empire. A slab of high-quality salt could be traded weight for weight with gold. That's not a metaphor. It was literally the same value. One could buy a servant, a camel, a bundle of copper bracelets, or even a wife with a few choice chunks of salt. And if you think that sounds weird, remember, gold didn't keep your goat meat from rotting in the sun. Quirky detail: people would sometimes carry lick stones, small chunks of salt worn around the neck or stored in pouches. Traveling long distances meant losing a lot of salt through sweat. You could take a pinch and lick it like a travel snack. Hydration? Questionable. Tradition. Undeniable. As you wander through the shade of a crumbling mosque or pause under the canopy of a merchantess stall, you start to feel how central salt was, not just economically, but culturally. It's in the way food is shared, in the way contracts are sealed. A meal without salt was considered incomplete, untrustworthy, even. Some superstitions said that people who didn't salt their food couldn't be trusted with gold. You round a corner and see two men weighing something on an iron scale. It's not coins. It's salt shaved and shaved until the weight balances against a little pouch of gold dust. And you realize, here, salt is the treasure. You're up before the sun now, tracing the path northward from County Solid toward the open desert. The sky is pale, bleached by anticipation. Ahead, a caravan slowly assembles, camels groaning like tired old men, traders wrapping their heads in layers of indigo cloth, baskets creaking as they're strapped into place. The salt trail doesn't begin in a single spot. It sprawls across scrub, over dunes, through heat so dry your eyelashes feel crisp. It's not just a road, it's a system, a living, breathing artery that pulses with the plodding rhythm of hooves and the occasional disgruntled goat. The camels, by the way, are the stars of the show. Without them, this whole enterprise would collapse like a sandcastle in a dust storm. Their knobby knees and water-hoarding humps are the difference between trade and tragedy. These are the ships of the desert, and they don't take shortcuts. Well, unless you bribe the caravan leader. You join them on the edge of the Sal, where the grass thins and the soil dries to a dusty orange. A breeze kicks up, and someone mutters about sand spirits. You pull your robes tighter and begin the long walk north toward Tagaza, the mine of bones and salt blocks. The pace is slow, unhurried, measured like the beat of a giant, sleepy drum. You count the bells, one for every 10 camels, jingling in soft dissonance as the animals move. The wind smells faintly of crushed stone, camel sweat, and dry leather as you walk. You start to understand the scale of this thing. These aren't weekend traders. These are professionals. Entire families move with the salt. Whole communities organized around the rhythm of trade. Routes shift, but the purpose doesn't. You meet a young boy carrying a pack of dates and a single block of salt strapped across his back. It's not a huge block, but he walks with a certain importance. This, you realize, is his first trip. He'll sell that block for something useful, maybe cloth, maybe millet, maybe even a small tin amulet if he's feeling fancy. A rite of passage, salty and sun-scorched. And so the salt road unfolds slowly, stubbornly. You pass broken stone markers, old wells choked with sand, the occasional ruined caravan way station. Sometimes there's a date palm clinging to life beside a spring, and you wonder who planted it. Sometimes there's nothing but sky. At night, you camp beneath the stars. The desert is bitter cold, and you wrap yourself in every available scrap of fabric. Someone starts a fire. Someone else slices dried meat and passes around a lump of salt. You watch as each person, almost ceremonially, scrapes off a shard and dissolves it on their tongue. There's something sacred in the quiet that follows. The next morning, you reach Tagaza. It doesn't look like a town, more like a mistake. The buildings are made from salt blocks, actual slabs stacked and braced with wooden beams. Even the mosques here taste like preservation. You walk cautiously, as if the walls might melt if you breathe too hard. The mines, they're grim. Low trenches cut into the ground, worked by enslaved laborers and hired hands alike. You hear the scrape of iron tools on stone, the grunt of effort. Salt dust coats everything: your boots, your hair, your teeth. It even gets in your ears. Historians still argue whether Tagaza was originally a Berber settlement, a punishment post, or something even stranger, a ritual mining colony bound by spiritual codes. Some say the people here didn't just dig salt, they lived it, ate it, worshipped with it, buried their dead in it. You meet a miner who has missing 3 teeth and has the driest hands you've ever seen. He says, "Gold is soft, salt cuts." Then he laughs, coughs, and hands you a sliver of crystal like he's offering candy. There are stories here, lots of them. Legends of salt cursed by ghosts, of men who went blind from too much exposure, of one miner who disappeared for 3 days, only to return with a camel made entirely of rock salt. No one asks questions. That's just the kind of place Tagaza is. But for all its strangeness, the mine is essential. This is the heartbeat of the trade route. Salt from here travels south on camelback, traded block by block for things that can't survive in the desert: ivory, spices, cloth, and of course, gold. Every slab is wrapped in palm matting and carefully balanced to per camel, sometimes 3. It's slow work, but the returns, massive. The Ghanaian merchants wait back in County Saleh, their scales ready. They know exactly how much salt to expect per season. They know when a caravan is late. They know when a camel has gone missing and what it was likely carrying. Salt is currency, yes, but it's also a schedule, a contract, a heartbeat, and you begin to feel it, the pulse of the trade, steady and deliberate. The road doesn't rush. It moves like the sun, relentlessly, with a kind of lazy inevitability. By the time the sun starts to drop again, you're back on the move. Another day. Another slow procession of camels, sand, and sighs. The caravan snakes southward, the blocks of salt catching the last rays of light and glowing faintly like moonstones. Behind you, Tagaza fades into the dunes. Ahead, the golden heart of Ghana. But you're not rushing. The salt will wait. You trudge beside the caravan again, feet dragging a little more, breath a little shallower, but your mind's still ticking away. It's hard not to, when every single camel plodding next to you is carrying a miniature fortune. Not gold, just salt. Slabs of the stuff, carefully strapped in bundles and swaying with the rhythm of each step. By now, you've probably realized something that would have baffled your modern, comfort-loving self. Gold wasn't the king here. Not really. It glittered, sure, and everyone liked the idea of it. But salt was indispensable. Salt was woven into your survival. It preserved your food, healed your wounds, balanced your electrolytes okay. So they didn't call it that. But still, salt was life, and gold was nice. And this wasn't just a personal preference. It was a cultural truth. You finally reach the outskirts of a bustling trade town, a dusty node on the web of caravan routes. Leading toward County Saleh, merchants line the road, their stalls shaded with woven mats and tattered cloth, their voices rising like birdsong as you pass. The traders greet the salt like an old friend. The camels haven't even kneeled yet before men are already eyeing the bundles, checking for quality. They tap the corners of the slabs, shave off chips, and sniff them as if they're inspecting cheeses at a Parisian market. It's a whole performance. And here's the part that truly makes your brain do a little sleepy backflip. For many of these people, gold was less valuable than salt in some regions, particularly where gold was plentiful. Yes, plentiful. It was viewed almost like decorative gravel. Pretty, yes, practical. Historians still argue whether salt's superior value was consistent throughout the empire, or only in specific regions and seasons. But records suggest that at certain points, an ounce of salt could command more than an ounce of gold in localized trades, especially during drought seasons or when the mines were slow. That means your little salt slab was essentially a high-end Swiss bank account on camelback. And unlike gold, you could eat it. You wander through a food stall now, brushing past skewers of roasted meat, baskets of dried fish, and sticky handfuls of honeyed millet. Everything smells incredible until you notice the little bowl in the center of each display. Not gold dust, not coins, salt. Pinches of it sit beside meals like holy offerings. Chefs not that anyone use the words whereby it's balance. Too much, and you ruin the dish. Too little, and you lose your customers. Just right, people start whispering about your magic touch. You try a bite of roasted yam dipped in a briny sauce. It melts against your tongue, and a wave of savory warmth like the dessert has softened just for you. The vendor nods. Salt is what makes the tongue speak, he says, as if reciting scripture. A young woman offers you a bundle of fish wrapped in palm fronds, dried, smoked, preserved in salt from Tagaza. 3 moons old, she boasts. Still sweeter than fresh. It's a culinary marvel, sure, but also a logistical one. Without salt, preservation in this climate was a lost cause. Fresh food spoiled faster than you could say spicy. Sand stew, salt kept food alive. And in a land of traders, merchants, and long-haul journeys, that was more precious than all the sparkly metal you could carry. You sit at the edge of a well and think about that. Why would gold be worth more? When it didn't keep your fish from rotting, it couldn't disinfect a wound, it couldn't flavor your stew. In a hot, dry, wide world where basic survival required ingenuity, salt was the quiet, crystalline hero of the economy. Quirky detail. In some villages, salt blocks were carved into tokens small, coin-like discs shaped with symbols to represent family names or tribes. These salt coins were used for barter and even marriage dowries. One traveler described a ceremony where a father gave his daughter away in exchange for a wheel of salt carved with a sun on one side and a gazelle on the other. Romantic. That's debatable. Memorable? Absolutely. You follow a few traders into the main square, where larger deals go down. Here, the big players trade in slabs taller than your knees. Salt is measured not in pounds but in presence. One trader drags in a cart pulled by oxen, each slab stamped with a brand mark. His competitor carries smaller, purer blocks but seasoned with herbs, making them more valuable for cooking. Artisan salt, basically. A man near the center wears a tunic stitched with tiny gold beads. It shimmers in the sun, drawing admiring glances. But his belt buckle? A smooth piece of polished salt, wrapped in leather and hung like a trophy. You ask a passing merchant what the salt buckle means. Leadership, she says, or sometimes. Generosity? It means you have enough to share. Now that's something gold doesn't always say. Later, as the sun sinks low and the shadows stretch long, a storyteller takes a spot near the fire circle. People gather, salt-slick fingers wrapped around wooden bowls of hot porridge. The storyteller lifts a chunk of salt, holds it to the sky, and begins. It is not gold that feeds a child, he says. It is not gold that wakes a warrior. It is salt that makes breath stay. Salt is the word of the gods carried on the tongue, burned in the blood, whispered into the earth. You blink slowly, full and warm, as the story continues, and for a moment, gold feels far away. You rise with a soft stretch, joints creaking like the wheels of a merchant's cart. Around you, the town stirs gently, cooking fires reignite. The first calls to prayer ring out. And a rooster that clearly does not understand time starts yelling his opinion about breakfast. You head toward the king's compound. This isn't your average royal court, with velvet thrones and flowing fountains. This is Ghana's seat of power, and though it gleams with gold, the real treasures are hidden in plainer things. The palace walls are high, dust-colored, and trimmed with wooden beams. Geometric symbols are carved deep into their surface, some spiritual, some purely decorative, some probably just ancient graffiti. As you pass through the entrance, an arch framed with lion teeth and carved cowries, you are hit by the scent of roasting grains and incense. You know, the kind that smells like someone trying to disguise goat stew as divine intervention. You're invited to witness a royal feast. And sure, gold is everywhere. Gold rings, gold anklets, gold even stitched into tunics. The king himself, seated cross-legged on a raised platform, wears a gold diadem that catches every inch of light. He doesn't smile, but you get the feeling that he could buy your future if he wanted to. But here's the twist. While gold dazzles, it doesn't touch anything. Not the food, not the preparation, not the preservation. When the servants bring out the platters, meat stews, millet cakes, bean sauce is what accompanies every dish. Salt out tiny dishes of it, like edible punctuation. The king dips his fingers into a bowl of spice sauce, sprinkles a pinch of grayish salt onto it, and eats with quiet satisfaction. No gold on his tongue, just salt. One servant refills the salt dishes before touching the gold goblets. There's a hierarchy, and salt is at the table's center. In fact, it has whispered that new dishes are not even blessed or tasted until the king has tried them with salt. Not because it adds flavor, though it absolutely does, but because of tradition. Salt is purity. Salt is balance. Salt is what connects the body to the earth and the earth to the ancestors. You watch as guests follow suit. No one dares ignore the salt. Even the children learn young sprinkle, then eat. It's almost sacred. Quirky detail. One older courtier carries his personal salt pouch, tied around his waist like a prized possession. When you ask him about it, he chuckles softly and says, "Would you trust a cook who didn't carry their own blade?" Apparently, salt pouches are like signature spices, custom blends, chosen for taste, trade origin, or even spiritual properties. This isn't about excess. It's about status. Gold may adorn the body, but salt defines behavior. You hear court musicians begin to play soft strings and thumb pianos, humming like bees in the background. Dancers shuffle forward with calabash bowls filled with sweets, and once again, each guest takes a bite after touching the small crystal pile on their plate's edge. Historians still argue whether this salt ritual began as a religious practice, a social marker, or simply a health precaution in a climate where dehydration was a daily threat. But however it started, it stayed for centuries. Later in the day, after the feast has settled in the full-bellied silence, you stroll through the palace storage areas. Here's where the contrast between gold and salt becomes crystal clear. Pun absolutely intended. In one corner of the treasury, gold dust, stored in tiny leather pouches, tightly sealed, sometimes hidden inside hollowed-out gourds. Precious, but impractical. Across the corridor, salt slabs, each about the size of a cutting board, stacked neatly like books. Some are tagged with trader symbols: sunburst, bird claw, half moon. They represent regions, roots, and clans. These aren't just building blocks of trade, they're records. The salt here tells a story. Which caravans arrived on time? Which roads were safe? Which years were prosperous? One royal official leans in close and whispers to you, "Gold makes a kingdom rich, but salt keeps it running." He looks proud of that line, like he said it before. Probably has it stitched on a pillow somewhere. As you leave the compound, you walk through an outer courtyard where royal guards are training. Their spears glint faintly. Their foreheads are shiny with sweat. Nearby, a jug of water sits in the shade with a little salt dropped in it. Because salt replaces what the body loses, and these warriors lose a lot. You pause to take a sip, cool, slightly briny, and weirdly satisfying. The taste of endurance, of staying upright when the sun tries to slap you into the sand. As dusk nears, the city starts to glow in soft firelight. You pass through the artisan district, where goldsmiths hammer out earrings and bracelets. Their work is beautiful, delicate, ornate. But when you stop at a nearby food vendor for roasted plantain, he grins and offers you something shiny. No, not gold. A tiny packet of flavored salt, wrapped in banana leaf. This, he says, makes everything better. You believe him. You wander back to your quarters as the night falls in velvet layers. In the quiet, you reflect. Salt isn't glamorous. It doesn't sparkle the way gold does. But it's in the cracks, in the habits, in the hunger and healing of this empire. Gold may have dazzled the outside world, but salt held it all together. You wake with the sounds of a slow, sweeping broom across hard earth, the soft clink of clay vessels, and a distant rooster that, unfortunately, does understand time this morning. The air is dry but cool, and your feet carry you instinctively toward the heart of Ghana's strange, split capital, County Sala. No, you're not imagining it. This city is divided. County Sala is actually two cities stitched together like mismatched fabric. On one side lies the royal city, thick with Ghanaian culture, indigenous traditions, ancestral shrines, court musicians, and the king's labyrinthine palace. On the other, the Muslim quarter, a separate, bustling grid of homes, mosques, and marketplaces inhabited largely by North African traders and merchants who'd followed the salt route south. You step between the two as the sun lifts higher. The air shifts noticeably. One side smells like millet porridge, incense, and old leather. The other, well, if you've ever walked past a spice merchant grinding cinnamon in the back of a bookshop during a heat wave, it's kind of like that. Fragrant, busy, a little more organized, and people here, they're fluent in multiple currencies, multiple languages, multiple ways of measuring the world. Arabic scrolls set beside wooden Ghanaian talismans. One man offers to bless you using either Islamic prayer or ancestral spirit chants, your choice, no pressure. This duality didn't just emerge overnight. Historians still argue whether the Muslim quarter grew through diplomacy, convenience, or simply the irresistible pull of shared profits. Was it encouraged by the king, who wanted allies, or tolerated out of necessity? Because gold doesn't travel by itself. Hard to say, but either way, it works. You sit near a low adobe wall, watching a boy haul salt bricks from one side of the city to the other. He has headed from the Muslim trading post to the Ghanaian food quarter, a journey made a dozen times a day, every day. His job: deliver salt where it's needed in exchange for coin, leftover bread, or stories. Salt, once again, plays diplomat. Quirky detail: merchants here sometimes flavor their salt with dried herbs or incense ash, especially during religious festivals, not for taste, but for protection. A dash of mint-flavored salt under your bed allegedly guards against thieves. A mix with clove and ash repels curses or attracts them, depending who mixed it. This place is nothing if not inconsistent. As you continue wandering, you pass a scholarly-looking man hunched over a wooden tablet, writing with charcoal. He's copying a trader's log: names, weights, locations, and salt volumes. Yes, gold is listed, but usually as a footnote. Salt moves people, he murmurs when he notices your curiosity. Gold moves kings. You like that? Near the mosque, you pause to observe afternoon prayers. The worshippers kneel in rhythmic unison, each with a small stone or woven mat beneath their foreheads. You notice that some of the older men sprinkle salt on their prayer rugs, a tiny pinch, like a nod to purification. On the opposite side of town, in the royal compound, you hear drums. The rhythm is heavier, deeper. A procession begins, children balancing bowls on their heads, musicians tapping hand-carved drums, dancers swirling with cowrie shells jingling at their ankles. You trail behind the crowd, where an elder dips a carved spoon into a bowl of, yes, salt, and sprinkles it onto the ground in front of the palace gate. It's symbolic, an offering to the ancestors, to the earth, and possibly to the political strategy of keeping this whole empire functioning. Here, salt isn't just economic, it's cosmic. You overhear a traveler from Gao marveling at the city's strange harmony. To people's one stomach, he says, pointing at a fish stall. He's right, salt from the North Seas and stews in both quarters. Everyone's tongues, regardless of religion, crave the same thing. Later, you join a group seated near a public hearth. They're swapping gossip: who traded what, who's marrying whom, which caravan was ambushed, and which camel is apparently a total diva. You chuckle. Salt is passed around in a carved horn. One woman gestures at the horizon. Gold sits underground. She says salt crosses borders. That line stays with you. As night falls, the two cities hum together, lamplight flickering, children laughing. A call to prayer echoed by drumbeat. The Ghanaian side leans into ritual. The Muslim side leans into study. But both break bread the same way, with salt. You recline beneath a reed canopy and think about how odd and beautiful this arrangement is. Two cities, two belief systems, but one economy bridged not by gold, but by grainy, dusty, dazzling salt in the distance. A camel bell rings. Tomorrow, more will arrive. The morning finds you walking the outer edge of the city, where the last plumes of smoke from cooking fires spiral lazily into the pale sky. You're drawn toward a market. Unlike the others, this one sits on the edge of the forest, surrounded by low trees and weather-worn stones. And it's strangely quiet. No shouting, no haggling, no sellers shoving bowls under your nose. Just two lines of goods, neatly arranged on the ground. On one side, blocks of salt, sometimes wrapped in cloth or set beside small tokens, feathers, beads, sometimes even animal teeth. On the other side, gold dust and leaves, woven goods, strange trinkets, and no one touches a thing. This is the silent trade. You're not dreaming, and this isn't performance art. It's a centuries-old practice, perfected long before clocks ticked or spreadsheets tracked who owed what. Here, salt and gold change hands without a single word being spoken. It starts like this. Northern traders, often Berbers or North African Muslims, arrive with their salt. They arrange their goods in clear display, then step back, far back. Sometimes they leave completely and wait in the trees. Then the southern traders, Sonic, So-So, or other local groups approach. They examine the salt, place their own goods opposite, and leave. Later, the original traders return. If they're satisfied with the exchange, they take the gold and leave. If not, they walk away silently. The other party might come back and sweeten the deal, or not, and all of it happens in eerie, sacred silence. No eye contact, no arguing, no best price, my friend. Just trust, or at least a deep respect for tradition, distance, and, let's be honest, not getting stabbed. Historians still argue whether this practice began as a way to avoid conflict between groups with different languages, or if it had spiritual significance, trading as a kind of offering, not a negotiation. Some say it preserved neutrality, others say it preserved the illusion of fairness. But everyone agrees on one thing. It worked. You stand there, marveling. A slab of salt is inspected. Someone sprinkles a few grains on their palm, licks it, nods solemnly, then places a leaf pouch, gold dust glinting inside next to it. Still not a word. You half expect someone to start miming prices, but no one does. It's surreal, and oddly calming, quirky detail. In some versions of this trade, if one side was offended by the offer, they didn't just walk away, they would leave a symbolic rejection item, like a bitter herb, or, in one rather pointed example, a single dry lizard. Message received. You watch as a trader rearranges his slabs not by value, but by the direction of the sun. Apparently, west-facing salt is considered more open to fair trade. Superstition, maybe. But when you're hauling hundreds of pounds of crystal across a desert filled with bandits and sandstorms, you'll take all the luck you can get. The silent trade was more than just drama, it was strategy. Ghana's rulers encouraged it because it kept trade peaceful and predictable. The gold traders, often local, had a home advantage. The salt traders, many from foreign regions, had to play by local customs. But both sides knew the rules, and both benefited. You linger as a deal concludes. The salt's been accepted. The gold's been taken. A simple, silent agreement ratified not by signature, but by absence. No handshakes, no receipts, just a missing slab of salt and a pouch of dust in its place. You turn and begin the walk back into town. Along the way, you spot a boy carving something in the dirt with a stick. He's drawing two rectangles, one labeled with tiny zigzags for salt, the other dotted like glitter. His father watches, then hands him a real salt chip to hold. "Teach them young," the father says with a grin, before they start thinking gold feeds the belly. Back in the market, the usual chaos resumes: drums, shouting, smoke from a peanut vendor's grill. But the memory of that quiet trade lingers. You pass a group of women grinding millet. One adds a few chips of flavored salt to the mash. You ask why. "So the ancestors know it's worth offering," she replies. "Even food for the dead isn't served without salt." Later that night, a merchant tells you over a cup of sour tamarind drink that during drought years, salt was hoarded like treasure. Men died for gold, he says, but they killed for salt. You think he's exaggerating. Then he shrugs and shows you a scar on his ankle. Maybe not. You sleep that night with the desert wind brushing gently against your cheeks. Your thoughts full of quiet markets and sparkling salt blocks. Somewhere out there, another caravan moves under the stars. Another silent deal is struck. Another pair of hands exchanges survival for shimmer, and no one says a word. The wind is warmer today, like the air itself has been cooking under the Sahara's lid and decided to come down for a chat. You adjust your wrap as the morning sun spills across Calmby Salah's rooftops, and you follow the curve of the trade road again, this time headed toward the workshops. You're looking for the finishers, the folks who take the raw salt slabs from Tagaza and turn them into something a little more marketable. Because not all salt is ready to sell the moment it's scraped from the earth. Sometimes it's full of grit, or uneven, or occasionally home to a fossilized beetle. Not that anyone minds too much. Beetles are protein. So you stroll through a long corridor of low buildings and shade cloth roofs, where artisans sit cross-legged with stone tools, chipping, trimming, and polishing salt into smoother shapes. The slabs are weighed and sorted, the crumbly bits ground into powder and stored in jars. It's like a jewelry district, but everyone's covered in dust. And there's a serious risk of licking your product. One woman shows you her toolkit: a curved knife for trimming, a flat one for shaping, a porous stone for smoothing. She's fast, efficient. She tosses aside imperfect pieces with barely a glance and stacks the best ones in a pile bound for royal use. You ask her what makes a perfect slab. She grins and says, "Straight edges, no clouding, and heavy enough to hurt if you drop it on your foot." Practical, very practical. Nearby, a younger craftsman is carving designs into smaller block spirals, sunbursts, animal prints. These are likely gifts or ceremonial pieces. Sometimes they're buried with the dead. Sometimes they're given to the living, though only if you really like someone. He hands you one with a lizard carved into the side for protection on long journeys, he says, then snatches it back with a smirk. Unless you're traveling without a goat, in which case no salt charm will help you. You laugh, but make a mental note to borrow a goat. Historians still argue whether this finishing process was standardized under royal control or developed independently in merchant quarters. Some say Ghana's king appointed salt inspectors. Others believe each trader had their own system, passed down through family. Either way, quality mattered. A chipped slab might lose you a client. A polished one could win you a marriage proposal. In fact, there's a story being told today in the workshop. A wide-eyed boy repeats it while his mother grinds salt into coarse grains. A man once brought the smoothest salt block anyone had ever seen, straight like a ruler, shiny like river glass. He gave it to the daughter of a gold merchant. She married him on the spot. You raise your eyebrow. He shrugs, or maybe he just had good hair. Quirky detail: salt powder from the finishing workshops wasn't just for food. It was also used in medicine, mixed with herbs for stomach aches, or with honey to make paste for wounds. In some rare cases, people even brushed their teeth with it. The original dental plan You pass by a line of painted jars, each filled with a different blend: coarse salt for cooking, fine salt for healing, spice salt for rituals. One jar even has dried hibiscus petals mixed in probably a decorative blend for feasts or gifts. You want to smell it, but accidentally inhale a cloud of salt dust and cough like a broken camel. As you catch your breath, someone claps you on the back and hands you a cup of tamarind juice. It's sweet and sour and absolutely loaded with you. Guessed at a pinch of salt, because of course. Then you hear a sound that changes the atmosphere completely. A distant drum roll, not festival drums, not wedding drums, announcement drums. Everyone pauses, salt slabs are set down, knives are sheathed. The old woman next to you mutters, "Caravan's arrived." You follow the crowd to the northern gate. Sure enough, a new salt convoy is trudging, and camels sagging under the weight, traders blinking through dust. One of the lead camels has a braided tail. That's a signal. This caravan comes from deep north, possibly beyond Tagaza. Maybe even from the mysterious Bilma mines, people murmur. Some of the finest salt in all of West Africa comes from Bilma, in the heart of present-day Niger. Denser, cleaner, a little bluish in certain light, expensive. Traders from there don't come often, and when they do, it's like a royal visit minus the royal manners. You elbow your way to the front. The camels kneel with tired groans. The traders begin unpacking, and there, wrapped in thick reed mats and marked with a crescent symbol, is the good stuff. Salt that practically hums with worth. Deals will be made. Favors will be called in. Couriers will run to the palace, because Bilma salt isn't just salt, it's capital. People will remember who got a slab and who didn't. You watch as the first merchant from the Muslim quarter steps forward, inspecting the shipment. Then a royal clerk, then the goldsmith's apprentice. The social ladder reconfigures itself. Before your eyes tilted, however briefly, toward whoever gets their hands on this glimmering cargo. A man next to you whispers, "You don't buy Bilma salt. You earn it." Then, thoughtfully, or marry into it, you stay and watch the trades begin. A slow dance of offers and counter-offers. As the sun dips lower and the air thickens with the scent of earth, sweat, and the sharp promise of salt. No, one shouting dot, because when salt like this arrives, it speaks for itself. The next morning, Cambi Salah hums with a different rhythm, slower, somehow heavier. That Bilma salt has rearranged everything. Even the pigeons seem to coo more politely. And today, you're headed somewhere most travelers never get to see. The Royal Archives. No, it's not some grand marble hall with golden scroll racks and monks gliding in soft slippers. It's a cluster of shaded courtyards and mud brick rooms filled with bundles of leather-bound records, inscribed tablets, and bundles of believe it or not salt. You duck through a narrow doorway and step into cool darkness, where a clerk gestures for silence with ink-stained fingers. In the center of the room, a long wooden table is covered in tiny gold weights, sealed gourds, and bundles of carefully labeled salt shards. Welcome to Ghana's real vault. Here, gold is counted, but salt is measured. The royal record keepers have a system as old as the dunes, tallies carved into wood, lines of cowrie shells, and a catalog of salt slabs traded, gifted, or hoarded. You lean in to inspect one flat piece of stone with tiny symbols etched across the surface. Turns out it's not decorative. It's a delivery receipt, 3 camels. A soft voice explains behind you. 9 slabs, delivered at Moonhigh, accepted by House of Kalyate. You blink. That's right. Salt had paperwork. Well, the medieval version of it. Anyway, quirky detail. Some of these receipts were made of salt, thin, brittle layers broken off from larger slabs and etched with family marks, ordeal signatures. A few were sealed in beeswax and handed off like medieval salt-certified checks. You could walk into the market and hand one over as proof of payment. Of course, if you licked it, the clerk might get suspicious. Historians still argue whether Ghana's record-keeping system was entirely homegrown or borrowed in part from Arabic administrative models. Given the presence of Muslim scribes in the city, it's likely there was cross-pollination. But many locals insisted on keeping dual systems, oral records preserved by griots, and physical tallies maintained by clerks like the one now handing you a chipped bit of crystal with a number scrawled on it. Debt marker, he says, salt, loan, for months overdue. So, yes, salt was even used for credit. And it wasn't just the elite who used these systems. Families, too, had their own ways of recording salt transactions. You pass a row of low shelves where bundles of braided string hang like sleepy spiders. These are not tallies, color-coded cords with knots representing amounts, people, or even seasons. One red string with 2 knots might mean ode to blocks during the dry season. Or it might mean stop asking. Uncle Boubacar is broke. You're handed a tablet inscribed with trade routes and caravan schedules. The places have beautiful names: Outa Ghost, Walata, Gao, Nyani. Many of them are salted into memory by how much trade they facilitated, not how large they were, but how reliable their salt traffic was. If a route dried up, so did a town's. Reputation, the head clerk, a man with eyes like candle flames and breath that suggests he skipped breakfast, begins to lecture softly about the salt vaults. Yes, the king had literal storage rooms full of salt, some for trade, some for gifting, some for emergencies. Better to lose gold, he says, than to run out of salt when the rains don't come. That was no exaggeration. In times of famine or siege, salt stores could mean the difference between a starving city and one that survived long enough to wait for rescue or rain. These vaults were treated like temples. Guards were posted. Offerings were made. In one case, a royal edict demanded that each noble household contribute 1 slab of salt per year. To the reserve, no exceptions, no excuses, a kind of tax, but with taste. You pass through a side room where younger scribes are copying older records. One mutters a joke under his breath. Salt remembers better than kings. Everyone pretends not to laugh. You look down at the stone floor. There are faint indentations, smooth dips worn by the repeated resting of salt bundles over generations. Even the floor has a memory here. Quirky little side note: one early ruler was said to have commissioned a salt map, a relief carving of the entire empire's salt routes, etched into a slab and used as a planning tool. It's long gone now, probably crumbled or buried, but the idea still sparks whispers of awe. Imagine mapping your empire not with lines of ink, but with veins of salt. The archives also hold records of the salt festivals. Yes, those were real. Once a year, usually after the rains, traders and townsfolk would gather in celebration of a successful salt season. There would be dancing, food, the obligatory wrestling matches, and most importantly, storytelling. That's where the real records lived. If something wasn't sung, it wasn't remembered. And if someone brought Bilma salt to the festival, oh, the bragging rights. That was like showing up at a potluck with truffle oil and not being a jerk about it. As you leave the archives, your fingers are dusted with fine white powder, not flour. Not ash, just history. Salt that has passed from hand to hand, slab to slab, memory to memory. You breathe it in, and it's not just taste anymore, it's legacy. You spend the afternoon trailing behind a salt merchant who seems to walk like someone who owns the horizon. His name's Juro, and he claims to have crossed the Sahara enough times to wear a path in it. You don't doubt him. His sandals are worn thin, his face is etched like weathered stone, and the smell of sun and camel follows him like a cloak. He's off to oversee a new trade, one of the smaller, more specialized ones. Not the big, showy salt for gold swaps. This one's subtler, salt for textiles. And not just any textiles. These are dyed cloths, indigo rich and deeply symbolic. Patterns that tell stories, signal clans, or shout status. Ghana's salt is going to dress someone's future wedding. You reach a shaded corner of the market where blue-dyed cloths hang like waterfalls. Women with stained fingertips sit beneath them, folding, arranging, gossiping. Indigo is hard to make, even harder to keep from staining your entire existence. You touch one of the fabrics, and sure enough, your thumb turns vaguely smurfish. Euro gestures toward his wares. Not slabs this time, but salt grains packed in leather pouches, measured, neat, and ready for barter. He begins the slow dance of trade with the head dyer, a woman named Katia who's clearly not new to this game. They go back and forth using proverbs. Not numbers, not direct offers. Salt, apparently, inspires poetry. Yoro says, a goat cannot sleep in the cold without remembering the salt it once ignored. Katia replies, and a man who wears fine cloth must not sweat too much. You're pretty sure that means, don't lowball me. Historians still argue whether this kind of proverb-based bartering was a widespread norm or just a regional flourish in certain markets. It's hard to pin down, but it turns trade into a kind of performance and it keeps things smooth. No raised voices, just metaphors and mild sass, quirky detail. Some of the finer fabrics here are literally salt washed. The final rinse is done, with brine to help set the dye. So, salt isn't just traded for cloth, it's part of the production. Eventually, they reach an unspoken agreement, a hand wave here, a chuckle there. The cloth is folded, the salt is weighed. No contracts, just confidence. You keep walking further into the market. You find salt being used in even stranger ways. A leather worker dips his needle in the salted water to keep the hide from cracking. A brewer stirs salt into her millet beer to give it backbone, she says, grinning through a gold tooth. A spice vendor sells tiny cones of salt mixed with crushed peppers, portable seasoning for the road. You watch as a group of travelers load up their packs, alongside dried meat and water gourds. Each carries a small pouch of salt. Always, never forgotten. Then there's the salt amulets, tiny wrapped bundles tied to belts, necklaces, or staff handles. Some are just for health, others for luck or love, or, in the case of one grumpy-looking man, apparently revenge. He glares at his charm like it hasn't delivered yet. A Griot, the local oral historian, sits beneath a tree nearby. Children gather around him, and you decide to do the same. Because frankly, your feet hurt and the stories are free. He holds up a salt chip. This, he says, is the only thing that speaks to the tongue, the belly, and the ancestors all at once. He tells the tale of a woman who saved her village during a drought by trading her dowry gold for a cart of salt. She was scorned at first. How could she trade beauty for brine? But when the animals lived, and the food kept, and the traders returned, the gold was forgotten. The salt remained. The children sigh, and you might too, later. As evening colors the sky with oranges and purples, Euro finds you again. He offers a tiny gift, a carved salt piece the size of your thumb, shaped like a drum, for listening well. He says, you roll it in your fingers, careful not to crush it. It's fragile, but solid, ordinary, but powerful, exactly like everything you've seen here. You pocket it gently and walk back to your lodging, where someone's boiling rice over a fire. A pinch of salt is added with care, as though seasoning. A memory dot, and you realize that in this empire, salt isn't just a trade good. It's a language, one spoken through food, fabric, healing, and stories. And lucky for you, you're starting to speak it too. The morning arrives with a hush, the kind that tells you the dessert is taking a long, slow breath before exhaling its usual heat. You set out early, when the air still has that crisp edge and the world feels a little less like an oven and a little more like a clay oven with promise. Today, you're riding out with the salt runners. No Not camels this time. These are local couriers, men and women, who carry salt over short distances between villages, river posts, and minor trade outposts. They're the arteries of Ghana's inland economy, delivering what caravans can't or won't. You meet your guide, a weary man named City with a laugh that sounds like dry leaves rattling. He offers you a seat on a low wooden cart pulled by a stubborn donkey named Nemo, whose entire personality can be summarized as reluctantly employed. You head out past the city's edge, into scrubland dotted with acacia trees and the occasional termite mound the size of a small temple. The road is more suggestion than path, and every few hundred feet, City points something out, a tree where traders once buried backup salt, a broken pot once used to hide gold dust, a ruined hut haunted by bad math and worse in-laws. You pass a tiny way station village, not much, just 5 mud huts, one open-sided shelter, and a stone trough for animals. But at the center, raised platform with a woven mat and a bowl of, you guessed it, salt. City explains. It's a hospitality marker. Travelers can take a pinch, bless the ground, and rest. No salt, no stop. In fact, some say villages without public salt bowls were considered suspicious, even hostile. After all, who doesn't want to share their salt? Historians still argue whether these roadside rituals were formally regulated by the state or just a widespread social expectation. Either way, they acted as informal checkpoints. People remembered the generosity or stinginess of a village based on how salty their welcome was. Quirky custom. In certain regions, newly built houses weren't considered finished until salt had been poured at the threshold. It was both literal and spiritual, an anchor for luck, a deterrent for evil, and apparently great at keeping termites confused. Back on the road, City explains the practical side of the trade. Most runners like him don't deal in full salt slabs. They carry smaller pieces, hand-sized, wrapped in hide or tucked into gourds. Payment varies. Sometimes it's coin, sometimes grain, and sometimes it's a future favor, tallied in nothing more than mutual memory. You pass a lone traveler heading the opposite way. They stop to trade a joke, a sip of brine, and a tiny cone of powdered salt. For luck, the whole exchange takes 60 seconds. It feels older than time. By mid-morning, the donkey has decided it will no longer walk uphill. City shrugs and suggests you hoof it the rest of the way. So, naturally, you do. You arrive at a river outpost, just a few huts, and a reed dock, where canoes sway lazily on the water. A salt drop is taking place. This is the next layer of the network, river salt transfer. You watch as bundles of salt are packed into reed boats, some headed north, others west, toward smaller towns and gold diggers. Near the river bend, salt is lashed down tightly, wrapped in oilskin to keep it dry. One drop of river water, and the value literally melts away. Not ideal for trade. You help carry a bundle to a boat. It's heavier than it looks. Not gold heavy, useful heavy. A kind of solid responsibility in crystal form. When you finally drop it into the boat, your arms tingle. The boatman grins. You're officially in the Salt Guild now, he says. No quitting allowed. You share roasted nuts and smoked fish under a tree. Someone passes around fermented milk, tart and cold. It's seasoned with salt naturally. And someone else throws a pinch onto the ground before eating, murmuring something about feeding the road spirits. You ask how far the salt will go. Farther than you will, says the boatman. He's probably right. Back on land, you help reattach the cart, give Nima a gentle glare which she ignores, and head back toward the city. Along the way, you pass salt markers, symbols carved into tree trunks, painted onto stones. Sometimes just a pattern of shells left on the ground. These are trade signs, salt passed this way, or safe water nearby, like ancient Yelp reviews. But without the drama. City points to a faded carving of 3 dots and a line. That means Half slab traded here. Another shows a curved arrow, rerouted due to bandits. You wonder how many deals were struck or broken based on symbols like these. Probably more than you'll ever know. By the time you re-enter Calmby. Salah. The afternoon sun is starting to bully the rooftops. Your skin smells like wind and road. Your tongue craves something salty. City pulls out a pouch, unease it, and offers you a pinch. You toss it on your tongue, and it's sharp, real, grounding. This, you realize, is what moves through the bones of an empire. Not just gold, not just ambition, but crystal after crystal of patient, persistent, practical salt. The sun takes its time slipping away tonight, hanging low like it knows there's still work to be done. You stretch your legs beneath a reed awning near the edge of Calmby Salah's bustling gold market, a space alive with the clinking of scales and the muttering of merchants who still think whispering will make their prices sound lower. But tonight, you're here not to watch gold change hands, you're here to understand why salt, oddly enough, sometimes carried more weight than the glittering dust everyone claimed to crave. You're sitting near the merchant quarter where the weighers work. These are men, always men, for reasons never fully explained, tasked with weighing the gold dust brought by traders. Gold in Ghana, you see, wasn't usually traded as coins or bars. No, it was dust, carried in pouches, often wrapped in feathers or leaves, and doled out with little spoons no bigger than a fingernail. And these weighers, they used official scales regulated by the king himself. No one trusted a merchant to weigh his own gold. That would be like letting a kid slice their own birthday cake, guaranteed disaster. So the gold was weighed, measured, taxed. But salt didn't need all that ceremony. Salt was obvious. You couldn't fake a slab. You couldn't hide it in feathers. You couldn't water it down without it literally disappearing. It was trustworthy, visible, honest, in a way that gold could never quite manage. One merchant near you mutters, "Gold is for the eyes, salt is for the bones." And there it is, the essential logic of ancient Ghana. Historians still argue whether Ghana's kings kept salt value artificially high to protect local economies or whether it naturally rose due to scarcity in the savannah regions. Either way, salt was often priced in ways that astonished visiting traders. There are records of a slab of salt fetching an equal weight in gold dust, sometimes more, especially in the rainy season when salt degraded fast. You overhear a man bragging that he once bought a bride with nothing but the salt slabs and a goat. The goat was, apparently, non-negotiable. You lean closer to a group gathered around an elder who's explaining the market seasons. During the dry months, salt caravans arrived thick and often. The air was dry enough to preserve it, the roads open. But in the wet season, salt turned finicky, slabs crumbled. Grain stuck together like badly made porridge. Prices rose like bread dough. And this meant that during the rains, those who already had salt could command outrageous deals. Gold for salt, yes, but also tools, textiles, livestock. Salt wasn't just wealth. It was leverage. Quirky tidbit, salt was sometimes used as a test in disputes. If someone accused you of theft, lying, or worse, you might be offered a salted brew to drink during an oath ceremony. The logic: if your spirit was pure, the salt would pass easily. If not, well, indigestion was the least of your worries. You wander further, deeper into the merchant cluster, where accounts are settled in all directions. There's a scribe copying down debt agreements, another recording how many salt bundles a camel should carry on the next caravan. These numbers mean survival not just for individuals, but for the towns and villages waiting days away. One record reads, 3 slabs sent to Jen. 1 return spoiled. Payment withheld. Salt has a memory. And apparently, it also has a refund policy. You find a shop of finely cut salt sticks, palm-sized, smooth-edged, meant for elite households. A woman behind the stall explains that these were gifted during negotiations, courtships, and even apologies. You insult a man, give him salt, she says, with a shrug. It won't make you friends, but it'll buy you time. You ask if salt ever started wars. She nods slowly, not always directly, but yes, especially when someone tried to control too much of it. There was one tale part truth, part legend of a minor chief who tried to corner the salt distribution. From Tagaza to the Central Plains, he started adding flour to the salt bundles to stretch his supply, cheating. Essentially, he was found out, and let's just say, by the time it was over, 3 villages had burned, and the chief reportedly had to flee wearing nothing but a loincloth and shame. The message: don't mess with salt. You return to your seat as dust settles over the city. The air cools, voices soften, and somewhere nearby, a child drops a tiny pinch of salt onto the earth before being called in for dinner. It's a habit, a ritual, maybe even a superstition. But it's also a quiet reminder of what matters, not just gold, not just glory, but the simple, tangible, tongue-tingling truth of salt. The stars come out like glittering thumbtacks pressing into the dark velvet of the sky, and you're invited to a gathering beneath one of the taller baobab trees. An informal meeting of traders, storytellers, and stragglers with sore feet and sharper memories. They sit in a circle, passing around calabashes of millet beer and roasted ground nuts, taking turns trading tales. Not goods tonight's topic, salt superstitions. And it turns out there are a lot. The first speaker is an old man with a beard like wine-scoured rope. He taps his walking stick and says, salt carries the voice of ancestors, not metaphorically. He means it literally. According to his story, a family once lost their way in the desert, and only after sprinkling salt and a circle around them could they hear their grandmother's voice calling them home. Someone else claims salt can trap lies. Leave a bowl by your doorway, and if your guest refuses a pinch, they're hiding something. It's the ancient Ghanaian version of, if they won't eat your cooking, don't trust their accounting. Another voice chimes in, this time a young woman from a nearby village. She swears that mixing salt with river clay and drawing symbols on the threshold can stop bad dreams. Her uncle, apparently, hasn't seen a single ghost since. You sip your beer and wonder just how much of this is real and how much is really real, you know? Quirky fringe practice. Some women place salt under the pillows of their grooms on wedding night, not for seasoning, but to keep him sweet. No one really confirms if it works, but you get the sense it couldn't hurt. Then the Griot speaks. His voice is low, slow, full of cracked syllables and words that seem older than the moon. He tells the tale of the salt prophet, a woman with white painted cheeks who could divine a person's future by placing a pinch of salt on their tongue and asking them to sleep if they dreamed of fire. They'd suffer loss if they dreamed of water, fortune if they dreamed of salt itself. Well, that meant they were destined to wander. Like you, he says, nodding toward you with a grin. The group laughs, and you awkwardly sip more millet beer, which at this point mostly tastes like fizzy porridge with a salty edge. Historians still argue whether Ghana's salt-based folk beliefs were rooted in pre-Islamic animism, local clan traditions, or adaptations of imported myths. What's clear is that salt wasn't just a commodity. It was an interface between people, between the physical and spiritual, between what's traded and what's treasured. You listen as someone tells of burial practices. Important people were sometimes buried with salt in their mouths to season the soul, as one elder puts it, the logic. You leave the world the same way you lived in it, prepared, preserved, and impossible to ignore. Some say that the grave soil is sweeter when salted, which might just be the strangest Yelp review you'll hear all night. As the fire crackles, someone tosses a few salt crystals into the flames. The sparks leap high, dancing in colors that might just be imagination or might not. You lean back against the baobab trunk, warm, drowsy, and very aware that the salt trade carried more than wealth it carried belief. There's even talk of salt curses, that if someone used your name in a salt oath, you had better make amends quickly, or else. No one specifies what or else means, but the tension in their voices suggests you'd rather not find out. Then someone leans in and whispers a more recent tale, one that's not quite superstition, not quite history. A trader, long ago, mixed sand into his salt and sold it along the Gambia River. He made a fortune, but his grandchildren, generations later, were all born with no sense of taste. They ate and ate, but never felt full. Poetic justice, maybe. A metaphor, probably. But also, somehow, believable. You rise to stretch, your muscles still stiff from the salt runner's road, and you realize just how tightly the belief systems of this world are tied to its trade. Salt isn't just in the food, it's in the proverbs, and the warnings, and the dreams people dare to interpret before the gathering breaks. The griot finishes one last chant, something about salt, soil, and the silence between storms. Then he hands you a tiny pouch with 3 salt crystals inside. For sleep, he says. One for memory, one for comfort, one for not snoring. You're not sure whether to laugh or thank him or both, so you do both. You return to your quarters. Under a sky still blinking with stars, you place the pouch on your sleeping mat and lie back. The smell of ash and spice still lingering in your clothes, your tongue tingling slightly. Maybe it's superstition, maybe it's just sodium, but either way, you sleep deeply. And dream of salt. The next day, you wait before the call of the market cockerels, not because you're eager, but because something in the wind smells different. It's sharper, like stone scraped on metal, and full of the electric promise of movement. A caravan is departing today, and you, sleepy soul that you are going to trail behind it like a tumbleweed with better posture. You find the group gathering just beyond County Sala's northern gate. Camels kneel, groaning like drama queens. Bundles are being checked, double-checked, rewrapped, and then inexplicably unwrapped again because someone forgot to label their salt bundles this time. There's the jangle of harness bells, the rustle of dried millet cakes being tucked into saddlebags, and the soft mutter of 100 traders waking up before their brains are fully installed. You fall in step beside a young caravan leader named Viola. She's got sand-colored braids, the confidence of someone who's survived at least the sandstorms and one extremely bad stew, and a tattoo of a salt slab on her forearm, which is either cool branding or an overly specific personality trait. Viola is heading north, not all the way to Tagaza, but close, stopping in a series of way stations and villages where salt is traded, sampled, and occasionally serenaded, depending on how many string instruments someone's packed. You ask her why she deals in salt instead of gold. Gold, she shrugs, goes to kings. Salt goes to everyone else. You nod, knowing she said something simple and true. Salt is the empire's bloodstream, and this caravan is one long, creaky, sun-drenched artery. You begin the slow, deliberate march. Camels first, then donkeys, then porters, then the stragglers and hangers-on scholars, scribes, even the occasional musician hoping to pay their way in stories. You fall somewhere in between, not quite useful, not quite ornamental. The road stretches out like a pale scar through scrubland. Dust curls underfoot. The sun begins its climb, and the caravan settles into a rhythm. One step, two, repeat. Forever. Historians still argue whether these caravans function more like mobile markets or moving military. Bila says it depends who's leading and whether you've paid your camel tax. Yes, that was real. Some leaders charged by the hoof. Quirky tidbit. There's a superstition among salt traders that the third camel in the line always carries the luck. No one knows why, but nobody wants to be number 4, so naturally. There's a minor squabble near the front as the merchants quietly jostle for that sacred position. The winner ends up tying a strip of red cloth to his saddle, smug as a rooster. You pass shrines made of stones and bones, roadside markers where travelers have left offerings. A feathered acorn. A handful of what else? Salt. You ask Bila if these shrines are religious. Sometimes, she says. Sometimes they're just to say, I made it this far, which, honestly, feels spiritual enough. By mid-morning, you stop at a shallow depression in the earth, an ancient watering hole now nearly dry. The camels sniff it with disdain. Water's been rationed, and everyone's chewing salted figs to fake a sense of hydration. You do the same, and discover that salted fruit tastes exactly how it sounds, like nature's weirdest paradox. Someone pulls out a drum, taps out a slow rhythm, another hums a traveling song, low and gentle, almost a lullaby. The sound blends with the breeze, the hoof falls, the rustling of trade bundles tied in goatskin. You're moving again. Hours pass. You think about nothing, then everything, then mostly about your feet. Eventually, you reach the first way station, just a few tents, a fire pit, and a wide wooden platform where salt bundles are inspected. These stops act as both rest points and trade barometers if prices are rising up north. This is where the whispers begin if a camel collapses from spoiled goods. Also here, Bila inspects one of her bundles. It's clean, solid, just slightly pink at the edges, likely from the clay it was stored in. That coloring, it turns out, is a kind of fingerprint. Traders can sometimes identify a salt's origin based on its hue and texture. Some prefer the grayer slabs, heavier, longer lasting. Others want the snow white variety, even if it crumbles easily. A few eccentric merchants even brag about owning yellow-tinted salt, claiming it's rare or moldy. Historians still argue the salt is briefly weighed, noted on a waxed slate, and the caravan presses on. Late in the day, as the heat breaks and shadows grow long and lean, Bila lets you ride one of the camels. You climb on like a confused sack of beans and hold on for dear life. Camels, you learn, do not care about your personal dignity, but the view from up high, worth it. You see the line of the caravan snaking through the landscape, tiny traders with precious cargo, moving as their ancestors did. It's a pilgrimage of commerce, a sacred shuffle between here and somewhere just slightly more salted. That night, you camp under stars that seem bigger than usual. Maybe they are. Maybe your salt-crusted eyes just think so. The traders sit close to the fire, knees touching, heads nodding in silent sync. You watch a man take a small pinch of salt and sprinkle it onto the flames. The sparks hiss and rise. For the road, he whispers, and you whisper it to because now you're part of it. You wake to the sound of camels chewing not hay, but leather. One of them has taken a liking to someone's saddlebag, and judging by the curses being muttered nearby, that someone is going to have a very breezy ride today. You stretch beneath a sky that's gone pale with early light, then roll over to see your hands faintly dusted in fine-grained salt. Of course, it's everywhere. In your sleeves, in your boots, in your dreams. You're basically one sneeze away from seasoning breakfast. Today, Bila says, you'll visit a crossroads village, not a big settlement, but important. It sits at the intersection of multiple caravan routes, and its only real claim to fame is its weighing house. That and a legendary soup stand. You set off again. The caravan thins slightly as some traders peel off toward other destinations. The rest march on, heads wrapped in cloth, eyes narrowed against the sun. The road ripples with heat and mirages, dance in the distance like shy dancers who never quite commit. You reach the crossroads village just before midday. It's not much to dozen huts, a watering hole guarded by goats, and the ever-reliable sound of haggling coming from under the biggest shade tree. But at the center stands a round, domed building, The weighing house. Inside, the air smells like stone and sweat and crushed grain. Heavy wooden scales dominate the room, each with iron arms, copper pans, and tiny bone counters used to track trade values. And right there, in the center of it all, is the standard slab. It's not for sale, not for tasting, and definitely not for licking, although a child tries it anyway before being gently shooed away. This slab is the benchmark, the metric, the truth. Weighing houses like this one are what keep trade stable, honest, and well, mostly fair. Salt is weighed against it, gold compared to it, and prices fixed accordingly. Historians still argue whether the Ghanaian state officially maintained these slabs, or if local guilds controlled them independently. Either way, the trust built around them was immense. If the standard slab got stolen, whole caravans would reroute, merchants would grumble for weeks, and some unfortunate clerk might have to explain to a very angry salt guild why everyone's trade numbers suddenly went haywire. Quirky tradition. When a new standard slab was installed, a tiny ceremony was held involving oil, music, and oddly onions. Don't ask. The symbolism is murky, but the tears were apparently both literal and spiritual. Baila exchanges greetings with the scale master, an elderly woman who's been running this place longer than most of the traders have been alive. Her name is Adia, and she carries herself like someone who once talked down a bandit with a raised eyebrow. Adia insists you stay for lunch. And so, naturally, you find yourself at the soup stand. It's not just famous, it's respected. There's a queue, a long one. The smell of simmering broth has drawn everyone from children to donkeys, the latter eyeing a pot of vegetable peels with the kind of focus usually reserved for wedding vows. The secret ingredient, salt, of course. But not just any salt. The vendor uses a mix of coarse slab scrapings and powdered flakes, each added at specific times in the cooking. First, a pinch at the boil, then a larger splash when the grain's going, and finally, a whisper, just a whisper before serving. You taste it, and suddenly understand why someone once wrote a love song about soup. Salt doesn't shout. The cook says, it listens. You try to pay with coin, but she shakes her head and gestures toward your pouch. Salt or nothing. You smile and trade a few grains. Fair's fair. After lunch, you watch as traders line up at the weighing house to have their goods assessed. Salt is laid out in flat pans, shifted, scraped, measured. The slab never lies. A few get less than expected moisture loss, brittle edges, poor packing. Others score big well-cut blocks, clean edges, perfect weight. Bayless slabs check out. She leaves the room with a grin and a receipt, a carved wooden tag marked with today's rate. You wander back toward the village square, where an old man is telling stories to a group of children. He's sketching a map in the dirt with a stick, tracing lines that crisscross like the tracks of ants with agendas. Each route, he says, is named after something: wine, stars, dreams, salt. Follow the salt road, he says, tapping one line, and you'll always find people, not cities, not treasure, people. You feel the line settle somewhere deep. Later, back at the camp, the air grows soft with twilight. Someone sings a slow melody on a flute. A trader shares honeyed nuts. Another passes a leather flask of something bitter and strong that tastes, somehow, slightly salty. You lie back and look at the stars, thinking of the slab in the weighing house. How it anchors an economy, stabilizes a trade, and earns respect. Without ever saying a word. It just is solid, simple, trusted. Like salt. You wake just before dawn, your bones stiff from a night on the packed earth, but your mind humming with anticipation. Today, Baila tells you, is a rest day, not for you. Of course, for the camels, apparently, even the most seasoned salt beasts need a spa day now and then, which in this case means being scrubbed down with dry grass and having their hooves checked for cracks, glamorous. While the animals recover, You're invited to explore a nearby craft village, one not known for salt mining, or gold panning, or even trade, but for containers. Yep, this village specializes in the humble, overlooked, and totally essential world of wrapping, storing, and moving goods, especially salt. You follow a narrow footpath lined with millet stalks to reach it. It smells of smoke, leather, and boiled bark. You pass courtyards where women work skins over curved frames, scraping, shaping, curing, the rhythmic shhk-shhk-shhk of blades against hide becomes your new ambient soundtrack. The first workshop you visit belongs to an elder named Worry. He shows you how they prepare goat skins for wrapping salt slabs. The skins must be cured, but not to dry, flexible enough to wrap tight around the block, but not so soft they tear. They're stitched with sinew and sealed with a mix of sap and powdered charcoal. To keep moisture out, you ask why not just use baskets. He raises an eyebrow like you've asked whether Sam makes a good pillow. Salt eats baskets, he says, tapping his temple. Give it time, right? Salt's not just a seasoning, it's mildly vindictive, quirky detail. Some traders mark their salt pouches with family symbols or even tiny blessings drawn in charcoal ink. One leather worker explains that she adds a drop of honey into the seam not for taste, but for luck. Sweetness finds sweetness, she says, and frankly, you hope she's right. You continue on to another courtyard where potters are hard at work. Salt jars, shaped like onions, are fired low to keep the walls thick. These are used for storing ground salt, especially in coastal or humid regions where slabs dissolve faster than a secret. In a gossip circle, historians still argue whether these salt containers were unique to the Ghana region or part of a broader trans-Saharan exchange of storage designs. The evidence is dusty, fragmented, and half the jars found by archaeologists are missing their lids, because of course they are dotted in one corner. A boy is chiseling patterns into a flat piece of wood assault tray. These are ceremonial, sometimes used in bride prize displays or religious offerings. The designs vary: spirals for continuity, triangles for strength, eyes for protection. One tray has a cat carved into it, lounging in a spiral of stars. When you ask why, the carver shrugs. Salt loves mystery, he says. You're not sure if that's true, but it's definitely poetic. You stop to share roasted yam slices with a family of basket makers. They don't use baskets for salt. Of course, that's been established, but they do for everything else. And in a pinch, they align their baskets with oiled hide or woven palm, then wrap the salt in cloth. The layering matters. Salt hates humidity. It crumbles. It melts. It fuses into weird, mutant chunks that traders can't sell. So packaging becomes survival, like choosing the right outfit for a very judgmental dinner party. You learn that skilled wrappers are sometimes hired by caravans to prepare the goods. Their hands, apparently, can tell if a slab is too thirsty. One woman lets you try wrapping a small salt brick. It goes about as well as you'd expect to tie it off lopsided, and the whole thing sags like a deflated drum. She fixes it with 3 fluid motions and hands it back. You're good at watching, she says, which is either a compliment or an elegant way to bench you. Back at camp that evening, Baila is repacking the caravan's salt supply. You help, carefully lifting slabs and sliding them into cured skins. You notice how the bundles fit together, stacked not like bricks, but like a puzzle, alternating, angled, designed to breathe without rattling. She hands you a knife and shows you how to test a slab's edge. You scrape it gently. If the grain breaks cleanly, it's ready. If it powders, it's to dry. If it squeals, you might have just offended it. The camels snort behind you, freshly groomed and clearly unimpressed. The sun dips low as you finish. Around the fire that night, Baila passes you a chunk of salt wrapped in cloth for your pouch. She says, you smile, unwrapping it slowly. It's a clean cut with tiny, sparkling edges and a faint pink line running through the center. not gold, but something better. Maybe something real. The sky ripples in bronze as dawn stretches over the savannah, and you're back on the move again, dust on your boots, salt in your pouch, and the kind of groggy optimism only a traveler in the middle of nowhere can feel. Today, Viola tells you, the caravan will stop at a salt broker's outpost, not a town, not a village, just a collection of tents, ledgers, and very well-dressed people who've never personally touched a camel. These are the middlemen of the salt world, the spreadsheet, sorcerers, the margin magicians. As you walk, you pass through terrain that starts to shift, less acacia, more rocky knolls and tufts of stubborn grass. The trail narrows where old riverbeds cut across it, and someone in the caravan jokes that if you fall in and don't come out salty, you weren't worth the trade to begin with. You arrive by mid-morning. The outpost is temporary, but impressively organized, large high tents supported by wooden frames, with flaps painted in bold red and blue dyes. Men and women bustle between stations, checking lists, weighing bundles, sealing contracts. There are no animals here, no homes, no fires, just trade. The brokers welcome Viola like an old colleague. They shake hands, share inside jokes, and trade exaggerated complaints about tariffs and camel mood swings. Then business begins. You're invited to observe. Salt bundles are brought forward, unwrapped, inspected. Brokers leaning close, sniffing for mold, tapping slabs for dryness, licking tiny corners like wine critics trying to detect notes of limestone and long walks. Each bundle is weighed, not just for volume, but quality, the color, the grain structure, the evenness of the cut. Slabs too irregular might be rejected. Powdery bundles could fetch lower prices. And then there's the truly prized stuff, flawless, opaque, edges sharp enough to slice a date in half. Quirky bit. One broker insists on wearing gloves made of cured fish skin while handling his salt. Better grip, he claims. Everyone else just rolls their eyes and lets him live his truth. Viola sits with a senior broker named Tagui, whose head wrap is folded in a way that suggests both dignity and low-key accounting wizardry. They talk rates. Tagui scribbles figures on a wax tablet, frowns, wipes them off, rewrites. Eventually, a nod, then a handshake sealed with a sip of salty date syrup, some odd local ritual that, despite its face-puckering nature, feels strangely official. You ask why all this formality for salt. Tagui grins. Because salt is memory. When you look confused, he explains, salt prices track everything: rainfall, war, rumor, camel births, merchant deaths, politics, bandit attacks. Salt reflects the empire's health. To follow its price is to remember the world's shape. Historians still argue whether salt brokers held any political influence in ancient Ghana. Some think they were glorified clerks. Others suggest they formed an informal intelligence network, treating information with the same urgency as salt. It makes sense. If you know who's buying more salt than usual, you know where armies are forming. If a region stops buying, you know trouble's either coming or already there. As you linger, you watch a group of brokers gather around a new slab delivery. It's from the north, but looks slightly bluish, with tiny flecks like mica. The brokers debate, is it safe, rare? Is it even salt? One cuts a flake and places it on his tongue. He blinks, nods slowly. It's clean, he declares. But strange. He records it in his ledger with an asterisk. You follow Viola back to her packs. She pleads half her salt's already sold. She'll trade the rest farther south, near the forests, where salt becomes mythically valuable, used in medicine, rituals, even tax payments. You ask her if she trusts the brokers, like a scorpion in your shoe. She replies, you know what's there. You work around it after the deals are struck. The caravan rests beneath stretched canvas awnings. Someone roasts dried maize and mixes it with salted peanuts. A snack so salty it practically dehydrates your tongue into a raisin. You eat it anyway. A younger trader approaches and asks to see your pouch. You show her the piece Bila gave you. She nods respectfully. That's Tagazakut, she says. They don't make him like that anymore. She pulls out her own pouch, showing off a salt charm shaped like a crescent moon. For dry feet, she explains. It's helped. A little. These charms are everywhere, you realize. Bits of salt carved into shapes, tied into hair, sewn into belts, rubbed along the edges of sandals. Some are practical, some spiritual, some just stylish. There's one shaped like a lizard, another like a spoon. You spend the rest of the afternoon watching the brokers file their records, wooden tablets, ink cloths, even etched bones. It's not just about what was traded, but where, when, and how. One slip in the record, and a caravan could be overcharged 5 villages from now on by sunset. The outpost begins to pack up. Deals are done. Salt is loaded, ledgers sealed, tents folded. It's a fluid system appearing and disappearing like mirages, but leaving behind trails of debt, trust, and crystal grains tucked into memory. Back at camp, Bila lights a small fire and passes you a cup of spiced tea. Tomorrow, she says, we cross the stone fields. You groan, already regretting your arches. But you sip the tea, and beneath the spice and heat you taste salt, because of course you do. The morning arrives on the back of a cold wind, one that scrapes across your cheeks and slinks down your sleeves like a mischievous spirit. Even the camels look annoyed, their fur ruffles and tufts, their eyes narrowed in what can only be described as judgment. Today, you enter the stone fields. Bila wasn't kidding. The landscape shifts from dust to rock with almost no warning. One moment, you're padding over soft soil and acacia shade. The next, it's nothing but jagged black stone strewn across the earth, like the shattered remains of an angry sky. The sun catches their sharp angles, casting shadows that stretch long and thin across your path, making every step feel like a game of don't trip or die. Salt caravans, it turns out, fear one thing above all else: terrain. And this is the kind that cracks hooves, snaps ankles, and tears through pack wrappings like they're parchment. Each camel walks slower, more cautiously. Their loads are shifted, their steps deliberate. You watch Bila adjust the rigging on her lead camel. She pads the salt bundles with extra cloth and ties protective leather straps over the pack's corners. It's not about looking pretty. It's about surviving the next 10 miles with your inventory intact. As you pick your way over the uneven ground, you realize that the stretch of the route is as much about endurance as distance. There's no water here, no settlements, no charm-wielding storytellers or soup vendors. Just you, the caravan, and stones that seem to multiply when you're not looking, and the heat, despite the wind. The sun bakes the rocks until the air itself wobbles. It's like walking through a forge. One trader mutters that his sandals are cooking his feet into jerky. Another ties salted cloth around his temples, claiming it keeps his thoughts crispy. Quirky tidbit: some traders in the past would bless their sandals with salt before entering these fields, scratching symbols onto the leather, sprinkling grains into the seams. Supposedly, it protected against blisters and bandits. Only one of those claims is believable. You ask Bila if anyone's ever tried to avoid this route. She snorts. Sure, but the other path's longer, steeper, and has more bandits. Pick your poison. Historians still argue whether this rocky belt was a natural barrier or an accidental trade funnel, forcing caravans into narrower corridors where prices could be monitored, taxes more easily levied, and people more tightly controlled. It's one of those questions where the landscape itself might be the answer. Midway through the field, you pass a circle of standing stones, tall, black, slightly curved inward. They're not natural, that much is clear. Someone placed them here, long ago. The why remains fuzzy. The traders fall quiet as they pass. You hear one whisper, "Salt circle." Another shrugs, "Protection." Byla just walks past without a word. Later, she tells you that some believe these stones mark the site of an ancient salt offering, a place where travelers left grains before attempting the crossing. She herself has never done it, but she also never steps inside the ring, just in case. You keep walking. Hours pass in a haze of crunching rock, sore knees, and occasional outbursts from the rear when a camel decides it's had enough and sits down like an enormous toddler. It takes for people and a bribe of salted dates to convince it otherwise. Then, as suddenly as it began, the rock starts to thin, the land flattens, soil returns in patches, and ahead, like a vision summoned by your increasingly sweaty hallucinations, is a trader sheltered nothing more than a few poles, cloth, and shade. But to you, it might as well be a five-star hotel. The caravan collapses beneath it, literally collapses. People drop to the ground, gulp water, rub their feet. Someone starts singing a tune that is either a hymn or a curse. A boy fans his grandfather with a palm frond while the old man chews salted lemon peel like a grumpy goat. You sit with Byla and the others, quietly sharing whatever's left of your fig stash. The talk turns to other salt routes, those that skirt the edges of the desert, those that hug the rivers, those that pass through ghost towns where no one remembers the names anymore. One trader describes a region where the salt is so fine it flows like sand, a river salt, he calls it, collected by sifting dry lake beds. Another swears by salt from volcanic cliffs, dark as coal and rumored to taste like thunder. That last bit seems dramatic, but then again, so does most of this. Journey died as the air cools and stars creep into the horizon. The talk dies down. A few traders place small salt offerings at the edge of the stone field. Tiny piles shaped like pyramids or stars. One carves a spiral with his finger, pours a pension, and covers it with a pebble. "Thanks for letting us pass," he murmurs. You lie back on the sand, every muscle in your body buzzing like it's just remembered it exists. You watch a star blink into view, then another, then too many to count. You taste salt on your lips, not from your pouch, not from your food, but just from being here. And as you drift into sleep, legs aching and dreams forming slow and thick. In your head, one thought sticks. Salt doesn't just move through the land, it knows it, and maybe it remembers. Morning greets you with silence, thick and golden, and full of heat still waiting to unfold. The stone fields are behind you now, but their memory lingers in your joints, like the creak of an old door that no amount of oil or stretching can quite fix. The caravan presses on, this time toward a lesser-known destination, a forest-edge settlement, where salt becomes less of a commodity and more of a miracle. It's one of the final destinations for traders coming from the savannah, and here, the bundles of hard-earned salt are exchanged for forest goods, coal and nuts, ivory, rich woven cloth, and the kind of spices that make your nose twitch even before you see the pouch. As you walk, the landscape shifts once again. Scrub gives way to greenery, the air thickens, and the trail narrows into a winding path hugged by low trees and humming insects. The sounds change too, from wind against rock to birdsong, frogs, and the occasional mysterious rustling that makes you clutch your salt pouch like it's a security blanket. The village you approach isn't large, but it smells incredible, like roasted cassava, fresh palm oil, and pepper smoke. The traders are met with cautious excitement. This isn't the kind of place people visit just to pass through. It's a terminus, a marketplace, and, to the local people, a place where salt carries almost mythical weight. Byla introduces you to a trader named Quinn, who's been operating here for decades. He's short, broad, and has a beard that somehow manages to look styled despite the complete absence of barbers anywhere nearby. He carries a carved walking stick that, you quickly learn, is mostly for pointing dramatically at salt deals he's unhappy with. He walks you through the market, narrating like a sleep-deprived auctioneer. This slab here, Tagazacut, dust pressed, wrapped into layered goat hide. Look at that grain. You can hear the crackle. And this, powdered salt, river lifted, stored in a gourd. Spice for healing, maybe also for sneezing. Depends who's using it. The market thrives on barter. There are no coins here. No gold dust in leather pouches. It's all goods for good salt traded by weight, texture, and story. A woman offers 3 rolls of dyed fabric for a single slab. Another proposes a collection of medicinal roots. One particularly animated trade involves a rare bird with iridescent feathers being swapped for just 2 handfuls of powdered salt. Quinn mutters, "That's a loss," but doesn't interfere. Historians still argue whether salt's value at these farce markets was economic or ritualistic, whether it served as a spiritual offering or simply a way to season things that would otherwise taste like boiled bark. The truth is likely both, because here, salt isn't just salt. It's prestige. It's ceremony. It's the thing you bring to a funeral and a wedding. You watch as a man grinds salt into fine powder with a smooth stone. He sprinkles it over a woven mat and folds it tightly, then places the whole bundle into a clay jar sealed with wax. When you ask why, he says, "It's for a naming ceremony." The baby gets a dab on the tongue. Quirky practice. Some elders believe salt can close the mouth of sorrow. They'll place it in mourning homes under thresholds, inside pots, even in shoes. Supposedly, it absorbs grief. Whether that's literal or metaphorical is delightfully unclear. You're invited to witness a cooking demonstration by a local herbalist who shows how salt is mixed with powdered ginger and pepper to create a seasoning paste. She lets you try a tiny bite, and you're hit with what can only be described as flavor violence, a punch of heat, tang, and salt that could probably scare away minor spirits. As the afternoon drifts on, you notice the traders carefully tallying their exchanges. Viola counts her bundles, adjusts her notes, and trades a final slab for a pair of exquisitely beaded sandals. "For my sister," she says, but you're pretty sure she means herself. That evening, the village holds a gathering, a cross between a celebration and a farewell. The salt caravan will leave at dawn, but tonight it rests, children dancing. The firelight, their faces painted in ash and clay, drums beat slow and deep. Like a heartbeat preparing for sleep, you sit with Bila, Quinn, and a few others near the edge of the crowd. They talk about roots, rumors, and changes in demand. Someone says that salt prices in the East have spiked, possibly due to flooding. Another claims a new mine has opened farther north, but no one can agree if it's real or another desert mirage whispered between weary travelers. Salt, it turns out, is not a static story. It bends and shifts, just like the paths that carry it. Died before bed. You're offered a small bowl of ceremonial water infused with herbs and just a pinch of salt to calm the soul, says the elder who hands it to you. It tastes strange, earthy, but your muscles seem to understand it before your brain does later. Tucked beneath a mosquito net and a warm blanket, you drift off to sleep listening to the low hum of frogs, the crackle of a dying fire, and a lullaby sung in a language you don't understand, but feel in your ribs. Somewhere nearby, a salt pouch jingles softly in the night breeze. You rise to the soft patter of rain, just a light drizzle, not enough to soak, but enough to turn the red dirt to paste and draw out the earthy scent of forest moss and damp leaves. The air feels alive, breathing, pulsing with the kind of moisture that salt hates. Bila squints at the sky and wraps her remaining slabs in an extra layer of oiled cloth. The last stretch, she mutters, always the trickiest. The caravan's now smaller than when you began, half the salt sold. Some traders already split off in other directions. What's left are the veterans, the stubborn ones, the dreamers, and you, still trailing along, wondering when your feet stopped being your own and became dusty, salt-driven ghosts. Today's path curves westward, threading the edge of forest and savanna. It's not a heavily trafficked route, more a side vein in the empire's circulatory system. But it leads somewhere important, a village known for its salt stories. Yes, that's right, not its salt production, not its trade, but its tales. The place is called Sudi, and it sits low in a bowl of hills, half sunken into the landscape like it's trying to nap between errands. Smoke curls from re-thatched roofs, dogs nap in doorways, and the moment your group steps inside the perimeter, a child runs off yelling, "Salt people! Salt people!" You don't even flinch anymore. That's what you are now. The chief of Sudi is an elder named Nana Ariba, who greets you with the kind of slow grin that makes it very clear she knows things, ancient things. Her robes are dyed in dark indigo, and her salt pouch isn't hidden, it's slung across her chest like an heirloom sword. She invites you all to sit in the story hut. Yes, the story hut. It's circular, warm, and filled with carvings, wooden panels depicting salt slabs, stars, rivers, and figures carrying goods across landscapes that could very well be memory or imagination. You sit on woven mats, salt dust still, clinging to your sleeves, and let the stories begin. Nana Ariba starts with a quiet voice, but the moment she speaks, the hut changes. Time softens, breathing slows, even the camels outside seem to hush. She tells of the salt singer, a traveler who could sniff out hidden deposits by humming and listening to the echo. Some say she walked barefoot for 300 miles, carrying nothing but a gourd and a flute. She died, apparently, while trying to mine salt from moonlight. You chuckle, but no one else does. Then comes the tale of the twin slabs, to blocks of salt so perfectly cut that their owners fought over them for 10 years. They were identical in shape, weight, and color. In the end, both slabs were lost in a flood, and the river was named after the argument. Quirky detail: there's a carved replica of the twin slabs on the wall, and each child in the village is taught to solve which is which, even though they're still, hilariously, identical. You listen for hours. One story speaks of salt used as a trap placed on a sacred path where spirits were known to wander. Supposedly, salt disrupted their movement, or maybe just annoyed them. Either way, the spirits went elsewhere. Another tale claims that the first king of Ghana was born holding a grain of salt in his closed fist. Historians still argue whether that's symbolic, Nana Ariba says with a twinkle, or just a very specific labor story. By midday, you're dizzy with myth and hungry. Fortunately, there's food, boiled plantains, smoked fish, and a spice stew that you're warned is salted twice, once for flavor, once for memory. That second part confuses you until you taste it. And suddenly, the stories make sense. You help clean up, collecting wooden bowls, passing water, brushing the salt dust from a carved bench. Then one of the elders shows you a slab wrapped in bark and leaves, passed down for generations. She says, never traded, never used, only shown. It's small, flawed, a little chipped, but treated like gold. She lets you touch it, just briefly. It's warm, dry, and somehow impossibly heavy with silence. You return to the caravan's edge as the rain lightens to mist. Bila sits with her boots off, polishing a blade that probably hasn't been used in months. She nods toward the village. They remember, she says. You agree. Not just remember salt, but what it meant. How it shaped the land, connected strangers, flavored weddings, sealed funerals, calmed grief, and preserved fish before freezers were even a glint in humanity's future confusion. You think about Nana Ariba's final story, one she whispered, almost to herself. Salt knows how to disappear. It melts, it vanishes, but always leaves something behind. You jot the words down on a scrap of cloth, unsure whether they're fact, folklore, or prophecy. Probably all three. This journey has made it hard to tell. The night, you sleep outside the story hut, curled in your blanket, with your salt pouch beneath your head like a pillow full of ghosts. You dream of slabs that sing in forests that whisper names in brine. And when you wait, your tongue tastes of something familiar, but also a little new. You wake early in Sooty, the story village still hushed and silver with dew. Chickens scratch near the huts. A few dogs stretch and yawn like they, too, listen to one tale too many the night before. You roll up your blanket and find Byla, already securing her last salt bundles, her movements fluid and practiced. She's leaving nothing to chance now, every knot triple checked, every edge tested for crumble. Last leg, she says. Then the great stop. You raise an eyebrow. She just smiles. The caravan sets out once again, leaving the circle of stories behind. The trail this time feels older, less certain. It's overgrown in places. A little muddier from the rain, and strangely quiet, not ominous, just still. Like the trees are waiting. Today's destination is a place Byla calls the Salt Hush. It's a clearing deep in the forest, a sort of neutral zone, half mythical, half real, where traders historically paused, rested, and sometimes left things behind. No markets here, no brokers, no buyers, no hagglers with fish-skin gloves, just a grove where salt was once set down not to be sold, but to be shared, maybe traded, maybe offered, maybe simply left. Historians still argue whether the Salt Hush was an actual economic practice or more of a spiritual resting point. Some think it started as a hidden stash site, used to balance trade between groups who didn't trust face-to-face meetings. Others think it was a sacred place of balance where too much salt became a burden, and releasing it brought peace. You pass under the thick green canopy, sun flickering like candlelight through high branches. The path is softer here, padded with fallen leaves and the faintest aroma of crushed herbs. You hear birds. Yes, but also the flutter of wings too small for your eyes to track. It's beautiful and faintly unsettling. As you walk, you notice the change in your fellow travelers. Less chatter, less whistling. Even the camels seem contemplative. Their plodding footfalls soften on the forest floor. Eventually, the trees open up into a wide, almost perfectly round clearing. At its center, a low mound of stone and clay. Around it, dozens, no, hundreds of fragments, bits of leather, sawdust, cloth-wrapped bundles turned brittle with age. You've arrived. Byla nods at the mound. That's the hush. No one explains more. Instead, the traders begin quietly placing items around the perimeter. A pouch of ground salt here, a chunk of flawed slab there, a small charm made from salt and bone, tied with string. One man kneels and scatters powdered salt in a spiral. Another places a dried fish beside his gift. It's silent, like a ritual everyone knows but no one teaches. You ask Byla if she's leaving anything. She holds up a single flake, irregular, translucent, probably useless. This one nearly broke a camel's tooth, she says. Seems fair. She places it carefully on the smooth rock and steps back. You pause, then reach into your pouch. That first salt piece she gave you, flawless, sharp, pink vein, still rests inside. But beside it is a chipped corner, something you almost discarded days ago. It feels right now. You press it into the soft earth near a root, pat it once, and whisper you're not sure what. The hush doesn't respond, but somehow it feels acknowledged. Quirky lore. Some old travelers claimed that leaving salt here ensured your packs would come home full. Others said it guarded against thieves, spirits, or heartbreak. One tale insisted the hush was once a salt god's resting place, and that every grain offered added a breath to the world's balance. You sit beneath a tree, watching shadows dance along the forest floor. The hush seems to hum not a sound, but a feeling, like something sacred. But with muddy hands and travel-worn sandals, later, you help a younger trader adjust her wrappings. She's never left anything before, and asks if it has to be salt. You shrug. Maybe not, but it helps. She places a dried apricot near the mound. You both smile. As evening creeps in, a light fog threads through the clearing. Fireflies hover just beyond the edge. No fire is lit tonight, no one wants to disturb the hush. Instead, dinner is cold cassava and quiet conversation. Someone tells a story in a whisper. It's not about salt this time. It's about a bird that flew backward to find the sun. It shouldn't make sense, but it does. You sleep lightly, tucked beneath a tree, salt pouch still at your side, not because you fear theft, no one would steal here, but because by now, it's part of you. You dream of a hand made of salt. It presses into the earth, not to harm or grab, but to leave something behind. When it withdraws, the soil is whiter, brighter, like it remembered something it had forgotten. You wake with that image still glowing behind your eyes. And though nothing around you has changed, you feel like something has. Dawn filters through the trees in thin golden slivers, and the hush feels lighter this morning, less like a secret, more like a sigh. You help fold up camp, brush the dew from your blanket, and check your boots for whatever forest insects thought they might move impermanently. The salt pouch at your hip feels lighter, even though you know you've only given away a single chip piece. The caravan doesn't speak much as it departs the grove. You all move like you're walking out of a dream, careful not to look back, like you might accidentally turn to salt statues if you do. Superstition, maybe. But no one's taking that risk. The trail now curves toward the southwest, deeper into the forest belt, toward a major trading city along the river. The name of the city changes depending on who you ask. Some call it Kalmbi, others Saleh. Still others something older, something sung rather than spoken. Doesn't really matter. Everyone agrees it's where goods converge, deals happen, and reputations are either made or mangled. The forest thins as you travel, replaced by low brush, then stretches of open savanna. The temperature shifts again, rising subtly with each mile. It's the kind of heat that doesn't shout, it whispers, steady, persistent. A hand on your back nudging you forward whether you like it or not. Bila seems more focused now, eyes on the horizon, salt bundles checked every few hours. She's not worried exactly, just calculating. You get the sense she's made this leg of the journey more times than she can count. And she's not a fan of surprises. By midday, the first signs of the city appear, not the buildings, not yet, but people. Traders, porters, farmers, scribes, all fumbling along rough paths toward a convergence point. And the sound of drums in the distance, slow, deliberate, ceremonial. You don't know what the rhythm means, but your feet adjust to it instinctively. As you approach, the city reveals itself not with gates or walls, but layers. Outer circles of travelers camped under makeshift shelters, then mud brick homes, larger stalls, rooftops of clay and woven thatch. Smoke rises in thin curls. The scent of spice, millet, and roasting meat clings to the air like a second atmosphere. And salt, always salt. It's here in bundles stacked like sleeping beasts, marked with charcoal sigils or family crests, in pouches hung around trader necks like medals. In powder form, sprinkled over cuts of meat left to dry in the sun. Salt, you realize, has arrived home. You follow Bila through the labyrinth of market stalls. Its overwhelming textiles, pottery, spices, iron tools, dyed leather, beads, carved talismans, dried fish, cola nuts, monkey skulls, possibly decorative, possibly not, and of course, slabs of salt tucked into nearly every booth. You pass a seller offering a salt tasting. Yes, a salt tasting. They lay out 5 varieties. Tegaza slab, hard, mineral rich. River salt, powdery and damp. Volcanic salt, dark and bitter. Ash blended, smoky. And one they just call sunburst, which tastes like sunshine and regret. You're not even sure your tongue understands the last one, but you appreciate the drama. Quirky tradition. The high-end salt merchants here hold naming ceremonies for their best slabs. No joke. You overhear one man declare, This one's called Mother Shield. This one, Lonely Camel. It's either marketing genius or pure salt-induced madness. Either way, it works. People buy them. Historians still argue whether these naming customs were widespread or isolated to this particular city. Some scholars think it was a symbolic form of respect for valuable goods. Others call it branding avant la lettre. Either way, salt names like Quiet Roar or Sky Memory are objectively excellent. You help Byla unload her final bundles at a broker's tent. It's not flashy, but the broker is sharp eyes like sewing needles, fingers tapping a drum. Rhythm on her ledger. She weighs the salt, scrapes the edges, even sniffs each slab like a pastry judge. Clean cut. You carry well, she says to Byla. Then adds, that one smells of night rain. You blink. Byla just nods. North cut. 3 rains into weeks. Soak the ground. A price is agreed. The salt handed off. And suddenly, just like that, your salt caravan is down to empty packs and tired smiles. You walk with Byla through the city as she spends her earnings slowly, deliberately. A new water gourd, a carved necklace, dried mango. She offers to buy you a bowl of tea, a kind of sweet tea boiled with mint and what else, a pinch of salt. It's delicious, weird, and somehow exactly what you need. As evening settles, the market glows in lantern light. Drums echo from a nearby courtyard where dancers spin in circles, their feet kicking up dust and laughter. You sit on a low wall, sipping the last of your tea, watching as traders file in from all over the horizon. A man from the coast unloads ivory. A woman from the mountain sells embroidered cloth. A boy no older than 12 sells tiny salt charms shaped like elephants. You buy one. Not because it's useful, just because you're not ready for this to end. You wake to the sound of flutes. Not loud, more like a wandering tune that drifts into your ears as though it's been looking for you all night. The city is already awake, of course. No one here seems to sleep much when trade is good. Merchants call out prices, roosters perform their daily overconfidence, and someone nearby is vigorously pounding millet with the kind of energy that can only come from spite or caffeine. Byla's already up, scarf tied around her hair, coin pouch clinking faintly as she adjusts her boots. She's not in a rush, but her posture says one thing. She's preparing for departure. There are still slabs to be counted, favors to repay, and new routes to consider. But today is different, because today, you're headed to the salt house. It's not a temple exactly, not in the spiritual sense, but for salt traders, it might as well be sacred. A central building near the river docks, stone-walled and sun-bleached, where records of salt exchange are kept, where traders gather to share prices, news, and what they call salty wisdom, which is, predictably, a mix of actual knowledge and wildly contradictory opinions delivered with full confidence. The salt house is shaped like a hexagon, walls engraved with names and symbols, some traced with fingers, others carved in with knives. You see a camel scratched into the left doorway, and a spiral on the right that Byla touches briefly as she walks in. A quiet habit, maybe, or an old superstition. Inside, it smells like clay, dust, and age. The cool air hugs your arms as you step in from the sun. There's a long central table lined with slate boards and wax tablets, along with notch sticks used for tracking trade weight. Every detail here is deliberate. Old school, yes, but it works. You watch as Byla greets a gray-bearded man whose tunic bears salt stains and artistic splatters. Tracker tendu, she says, and he responds with a laugh that sounds like pebbles tumbling down a dune. They trade updates. North road to dry, eastern mines flooded. One caravan robbed near the bend. Another made double profit with powder. Salt packed in dried gourd skins, a method you learn is both efficient and makes the salt taste faintly of fruit. Quirky tidbit. There's a tradition in this salt house. If a deal goes especially well, the trader leaves a salt saying on the While some are practical dry slabs travel far, others, delightfully odd if your camel sneezes. Turn back, your personal favorite, salt waits for no goat. Historians still argue whether these sayings were meant to encode trading secrets or simply to entertain weary merchants. Either way, they've become a part of the place's identity like sacred graffiti in a cathedral of trade. While Bila talks logistics, you wander to a back corner where a young scribe is copying salt measurements onto palm parchment. You ask him how long he's worked here. Since I could count, he shrugs. You ask if he's ever carried salt himself. He blinks. Me, no. I write. They walk. Then, almost sheepishly, he opens a drawer and shows you a single, tiny piece of rock salt tucked in linen. My uncle brought it back. Said it taught him more than numbers ever did. You nod. You understand. Back near the table, a trader from the desert shows off a new method of binding slabs using twisted leather and beeswax. Someone else claims beeswax attracts sand spirits, which leads to a half-joking, half-serious argument that spirals into comparisons of salt cuts, camel breeds, and whether or not water-rich salt is more alive. Yes, alive. Like it's watching. No one wins the debate, but they all drink tea after. Which might be the point. You notice Bila leaving. A mark on the slate wall, just a simple spiral with a dot at the center. Reminder, she says, that this was the route where no camels died. You realize then that the salt house is less about numbers and more about memory. A collective mind made of travelers who knew that salt was more than weight. It was connection, burden, gift, risk. Story. You step outside just as the sun begins to dip low, casting long shadows across the city's mud brick walls. The streets buzz with evening trade, children chase goats, musicians warm up near the wells, and a baker sprinkles salt on a flatbread with the gravitas of a priest. Bila leads you to a quieter part of the market, where she picks out a cloth-wrapped bundle and presses it into your hands. For the next walk, she says, inside, dried mango slices, a small carved charm in the shape of a salt slab, and of course a smooth flake of the cleanest salt you've seen yet, clear as glass. Edges sharp, almost too pretty to use. Don't sell it, she warns. That one's for remembering. You promise not to. That night, you return to the same rooftop where you watched the dancers before. Now, it's calmer. A flute plays somewhere in the distance. You lie back, hands behind your head, and stare at the stars. You wonder how many slabs of salt have passed through this city. How many feet have carried them? How many stories were told, not for gold or fame, but just so anyone would remember? And as the breeze moves gently across your face, stirring the edge of your blanket, you think about how something so small, just a crystal, just a taste, could shape kings, cities, entire histories, all from a substance that disappears the moment it touches water. By the time the sun rises, the air is already thick with heat and promise. The city stirs in layers, first the water sellers, then the bakers, then the traders with their bright fabrics and practiced shouts. It's a rhythm you've grown to know intimately now, like the quiet stretch before a yawn or the creak of leather before the march. But today is different, because today, you're not just a tag-along. Today, Bila takes you to the weighing square. It's not a glamorous place. No music, no dancers, no brightly colored spices. Just a sun-bleached square paved with cracked stones, and in the center, a series of wooden beams and hanging pans, an old balance scale, large enough to weigh a full salt slab against anything, from gold to cloth to the occasional reluctant chicken. The square is run by two women in their 50s who speak only in grunts and pointed eyebrows. Their job is to verify trades, not to make the deals, just to ensure fairness. If a slab is chipped, brittle, or damp, they mark it with a thumb smudge of charcoal, not worth full value. No arguments. They've been known to outstare war horses. You watch Bila approach the scales with her final piece, a dense, rose-hued slab that glows faintly in the sunlight. It's the kind of salt that makes merchants lean forward, even you hold your breath. The older scale woman squints, taps the slab, tastes a corner yes, just like that, and finally gives a nod. It passes. What follows is one of those trades that doesn't need words, just gestures. Bundles unwrap, and an exchange that feels almost ritualistic. Salt for cloth, salt for dried gourds filled with dye, salt for a brass mirror. Bila raises an eyebrow at the last one, but takes it anyway. You ask why later. She shrugs. Someone will want to see their face again, and somehow that feels true. You spend the rest of the day winding through the Guild Alley's rows of workshops, where artisans spin the raw materials of trade into beauty. One room is filled with weavers looping thread into hypnotic patterns. Another has bronze workers smelting old tools into pendants. You pass a tented area where children grind salt into fine powder, with stone mortars defined for food, meant instead for rituals, medicine, or rumor has it, curses, quirky belief. There's a local saying that salt carries memory, and so powdered salt being finely ground remembers everything. Some healers use it in ceremonies to draw out forgotten grief. Others use it to reveal lies. One woman insists it can help undo bad dreams if placed beneath the tongue at dawn. Historians still argue whether this ritual use of salt began in ancient Ghana or if it drifted in from Berber traditions further north. What's clear is that belief traveled right alongside the trade, every bit as sticky, heavy, and persistent as the slabs themselves. That evening, you and Bila climb to a raised lookout on the city's western edge. It's not marked on maps, no sign, just a worn path through brush and a few curious goats. From there, the view is enormous. Golden savanna stretches into the haze, dotted with distant trees, threading paths, and the glinting curves of the river. You trace the horizon with your eyes and realize you've walked through all of this, and it changed you. Maybe not in ways that show. You still have the same boots, same salt pouch, same half-annoyed ankle that clicks when you stretch it too fast. But your silence feels different now. Full, not empty. Bila sits beside you, a dried mango in one hand, the brass mirror in the other. What do you see? You ask, expecting a joke. She stares into the mirror for a long moment. Then, dust and hunger, and the woman who carries both. You sit quietly with that dot as dusk falls. The last caravans of the season trickle, and you watch them from above. The creak of carts, the thud of camel feet, the shouted greetings of tired voices too joyful to be dignified. One caravan brings spices wrapped in wax cloth. Another carries books, real books, bound in red leather, ink stained at the corners. And one, just salt, a long line of salt blocks, heavy and gray, carried by people who don't know your name, but you know exactly how their backs feel. You wave, just once. They don't see you. But it's okay, because, you know, deep down, someone waved for you once, too, that night. Bila lets you try the brass mirror. You expect a trick, maybe something clever carved into the back. But no, it's just a mirror. You stare at Dot and see someone who walked the salt road, someone who listened to stories in the dark, who left a chipped crystal beneath a sacred tree, who now knows how salt travels and what it takes to carry it. Dot, and slowly, you smile. The city quiets as night settles in, but it never really sleeps. Even now, as you stroll through the back alleys of the market, lanterns swing gently in the warm breeze, casting puddles of gold on mud brick walls. Somewhere a baby cries, somewhere a lute sighs, and under it all the faint, unshakable tang of salt, clinging to the air like a memory. You've come to the end of the road, not just in distance, but in story. Bila's caravan has officially disbanded. Some traders leave at dawn, heading north again. Others are staying longer, chasing new deals or maybe just stalling the next goodbye. You watch them one by one, drifting into the dusk like stars leaving orbit. You walk the market one last time, not to buy, but to remember. There's the cloth seller who died with crushed leaves and salt brine. There's the woman who still insists salt can trap nightmares in a gourd. There's the boy selling salt figurines now offering buy one lion, get one hippo free. And there, tucked near a quiet corner, is the salt library. You'd missed it before. It's not a library in the bookish sense, no shelves, no scrolls. Just a set of low stone benches arranged in a circle, and people seated with salt slabs before them, each etched with marks like braille. A blind man sits in the center, fingers gently tracing the patterns. He doesn't speak. Not until someone new sits. Then, softly, tell me the road you came by. And so they do, each person, one by one, reciting their journey while carving tiny notches into their slabs. It's not about art. It's not about clarity. It's about the act. Each salt slab becomes a map of sorts, not literal, but emotional. Weighted. You sit, unsure what to do. You reach for your pouch. Inside is the flawless flake Bila gave you. The one meant not for sale, but for memory. You don't carve it, you just hold it and whisper your road. Bila appears beside you, unannounced, of course. She places her final slab, weathered, pale, slightly cracked on the circle's edge. Doesn't say a word, just sits, and together, you stay for a long time. Historians still argue whether salt carving was storytelling or record keeping, whether it was meant to communicate or simply comfort. One theory says the salt held vibrations. Another claims the slabs were eaten later, literally consuming your own tale. Maybe they're all wrong. Maybe they're all right. You walk slowly through the city's western edge, passing one last merchant grinding salt into face paint bright, shimmering, ceremonial. He waves. You wave back. Near the river, boats bob gently at the docks. Sails folded, nets drying. Someone is salting fish by a lantern light, rhythmically pressing slabs against scales with the reverence of a monk. You sit at the bank, legs dangling over the edge, the river brushing the stone like it's trying to remember something. You place your salt flake beside you on the ground, just to feel the weight of it leaving your hand. It stays. You stay. And finally, the world slows. The night deepens. The stars thicken in the sky, no longer shy. And the breeze turns cooler, soft as a sigh slipping beneath a warm blanket. You listen to the rustle of reeds by the water, the occasional creak of a wooden hull, the faint drumming of someone far off, tapping out a rhythm for no audience at all. Salt dust clings to your fingers. You don't bother brushing it away. There's comfort in its texture now, familiar, earned. The firelight of the city flickers in the distance, dimming slowly, like eyelids drifting down after too long a day. Traders settle into their mats, their blankets, their quiet laughter. Camels grunt one last time before silence falls like mist. You close your eyes, and in the dark, you walk the salt road again, not with effort, but as if it carries you now, step by step, across dunes and stone and forest and story. Your feet are light. The pack no longer weighs. The hush welcomes you. The slabs sing. You don't need to speak. The salt remembers. Its sharpness fades into softness, its heaviness into hush, and your breath slows to match the rhythm of a world that turns patiently, quietly, waiting only for the next step, the next story, the next dream. So rest now. You've walked far. You've carried what needed carrying. And salt, faithful and fleeting, still rests beneath your hand. Good night.